Thank you for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We are committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, regulatory actions, and political maneuvers in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact your freedoms.
Please support the State of Freedom by becoming a monthly supporter or member of the Warrior Circle, or by advertising your business, your nonprofit, or your event with us. Go to freedomstate.us. We are bypassing the mainstream media cartel and the establishment political parties in Louisiana and coming directly to you, spreading the uncensored voice of freedom across Louisiana and beyond. Fuego, it's just unbelievable. Whether it's the flame-grilled carne asada or a signature mango margarita, I had one of those too. They're serving up a literal feast of freedom at Calle Fuego. It's just extraordinary. I love the owners, Andres and Jose. They run such a great restaurant. The service is extraordinary. The atmosphere is great. So if you're in Pineville and the Alexandria area or passing through, or if you live there, go to Calle Fuego and tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Good morning, Warriors. Welcome to Warrior Wednesday. Did your local officials sign a confidentiality agreement before major projects came to your community? Public records requests are revealing a significant number of officials who did. These agreements may be common in business, but when they involve decisions that can impact your land, your infrastructure, your water, and your quality of life, should you be the last to know? Across Louisiana, residents are asking questions about how major development decisions are made, who is involved in those conversations, and why communities often learn about the projects after the important discussions have already been made underway. Today, we're following the timeline, explaining the law, and looking at what we know about the confidentiality agreements, public officials, and the decisions shaping Louisiana's future. This is Warrior Wednesday. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Chris Alexander, the watchdog-in-chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, and we're coming to y'all live, as always, on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Please take a moment, hit the thumbs up button, share this with your friends, help us out in the algorithm. If you can, try and watch it on YouTube. They try and just like push our numbers down so bad. And you can always catch us later on our audio-only podcast platforms. And I just want to mention that yesterday, if you were trying to watch us on one of our platforms, I won't say the name, but it's the blue one. If you want to be able to watch us and for whatever reason, the blue one decides that it does not like the topic that we are bringing forward, you should visit our website. Go to freedomstate.us, sign up to stay in touch, and subscribe to some of the other platforms that we're on. Just in case you can't find us, we're most probably still live at our usual time unless something crazy happens. So if you can't find us, particularly on the blue one or the red one, you can look at some other places to find us. All right. How are you this morning, Chris?
I'm doing well, Danielle. And how are you?
I'm good. I wanted to get that out of the way because I was super steamed yesterday. People were trying to watch us on the blue one and they couldn't do it. So anyway, now we are, I think it may be because the blue one may have some investment in our state that it wants to protect.
Yes, and perhaps wants to counter a narrative, perhaps?
Yeah, perhaps. I forgot to mention at the outset, it is Warrior Wednesday, and so if you are a member of the Warrior Circle, you can now dial into the Freedom Phone while we're live, and the Freedom Phone number is in our private Facebook group, so if you need it, go look there, and we'd be happy to have you text us or call us from that, call us on that number after we get into things. So Anyway, and y'all can also, as always, get involved in the chat. We'd love to see what your thoughts are on today's topic. But first, maybe let's do the scripture of the day.
Let's do it.
All right. Today's passage is from Lamentations chapter 3. It's verses 19 through 24. And it says, "Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall. My soul continuously remembers it and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him." And isn't that an encouraging word this morning? If the Lord God, the creator of heaven and earth, is our portion, how can we not have hope? He is endless. He's unfathomable. He placed the stars in the sky and he knows them all by name. He is the commander of angel armies of countless millions or possibly more angels. His resources, his understanding, and his love never fail. He is the all sufficient God. And regardless of the condition of mankind, he is that all sufficient God, regardless of what happens in the world around us and what we see and experience, and even our own personal failings that may bring us disappointment, discouragement, heartache, and sorrow. Even through all of that, his love never fails, and his mercies are new every morning. His faithfulness is absolutely unending. So if you are discouraged or find yourself afflicted in some way, beaten down in some way today, look up. Ask the Lord to give you a glimpse of his vastness. Ask him to help you feel his mercy and love. Ask him to send beautiful reminders of his love to you along your path as you do the things that you have to do today. And shift out of the mode of counting your problems and into the mode of counting your blessings. I'm just asking everyone to join me in making the choice to hope in him today.
That's beautiful, Danielle. And always to remember that God is not subject to the constraints of this world.
Right.
And he's not beholden to this world. And if he truly is our portion and our cup, then ultimately he's going to work things out. Ultimately, he's going to make all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. You know, Danielle, it's so interesting that when you look at so many circumstances in the world, it's very easy. I don't know whether it's a natural human tendency or just because there are significant problems in our society and our world that people tend to focus on the problems and
Yeah.
tend to focus on the issues that at times can seem insurmountable. And that's why your reminder to focus on the blessings, to focus on the positive is so very, very important. And the great progress that has been made and continues to be made to preserve liberty and freedom, which is what we are all about. And a very special prayer that I would have this morning is that, you know, as I've talked to you about before, and I've struggled with this myself, I have deeply struggled with this, where you know, you sometimes say, you know, okay, so God loves everybody and he is with us and he's blessing us and so forth, but there's no possible way that he could be including me in that. There's no way that I can be worthy of God's unconditional love and graciousness because either of my own mistakes or my own past or my own sense of my own deficiencies. And so you know, I would pray for the grace this morning that each one of us would individually be able to feel the intimate touch of God's love and God's grace in our hearts and in our lives. Because it's one thing to theorize about God or to talk about God and even to know all the scriptures about God. And it's a very different thing to intimately, experientially feel Him and His
Yeah.
presence in our heart and in our minds. And ultimately, the rest of it is meaningless if we do not have an experiential encounter with with God. And He's eager, He's anxious, He's not withholding His love from us. But
Right.
whatever it is within ourselves, whatever wounds, whatever injuries, and whatever perceived deficiencies we have that block him from our hearts and from our minds, that by his grace those would be removed, and that each one of us individually would be able to experience the awesome power and grace of God. That would be my prayer this morning, each of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. And I think thankfulness is the road into that, Chris. I absolutely do. Because it opens up your heart. It reminds you that He has been faithful. It reminds you that He has spared you from, certain difficulties that you could have faced, or He's rescued you from pitfalls that you could have fallen into. We've all been there. We've all made dumb, dumb mistakes that God's scooped us out, or helped us to not, even sometimes we miss the consequences of them
Right,
entirely. And,
exactly. Yeah.
and that's His grace. And so I would just encourage everyone who's watching who may be struggling with that. Thankfulness is the key. Thankfulness is the key.
And maybe looking back a little bit, Danielle, and saying, you know what? What was I praying for 8 months ago? What was I praying for 6 months ago? What was I praying for a year ago?
That's right.
That God has now delivered, and now I take it for granted because I'm so
Mm,
busy focusing on the things that He has not answered yet, or
right.
He's waiting to answer, in His own way. So
It's
you're
true.
right. An attitude of gratitude is just massively important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I before we shift into the topic for today, I would love to see if there can anybody who's watching on Facebook chat in and let us know if Facebook is working. Just want to know if we are good to go on that platform. I think it looks like the other ones may be working. So,
Yeah.
Chris, do you want to? So today we've been talking about these NDAs. It turns out that they are kind of a core feature in a lot of the industrial development in Louisiana right now. And people have been really unsettled by them. I think people have been very angry to find out that some of these big projects are hidden behind legal shields. Would you talk about what the history, how did we get here in Louisiana? I mean, it wasn't always the case, right? That these big projects would come in under the cloak of darkness.
No, Danielle, traditionally, what's called non disclosure agreements were agreements that were executed between private companies, private corporations, for projects that were being privately funded. They did not involve the government. Under John Bell Edwards' administration, let's say, there was no public official in Louisiana who ever exercised a non disclosure agreement that would muzzle them from being able to talk about
Say
economic
say
development
that say
projects.
that one more time. Just say it one more time.
Under John Bell Edwards, there were no public officials who signed these non-disclosure agreements. It was unheard of.
Wow.
That would muzzle a local or state official from talking to their constituents about economic development projects in their parishes. It was just unheard of. This was all ushered in by Governor Landry under two bills that came in 2024 that we will talk about. And one of those bills completely restructured Louisiana economic development and vested total unchecked authority in the new Secretary of LED, Susan Bourgeois. And the other bill is the one that authorizes these non disclosure agreements, whereby uh, the Louisiana Economic Development basically says, okay, we're negotiating for a big project, whatever, from a private corporation to come into Louisiana. And if you, public official, local official, state official, if you want to know what is going on, and if you want the details of these negotiations and these multi-billion-dollar plans and negotiations, then you have to sign this non-disclosure agreement, which basically says you are not allowed to talk to the people who elected you about the details of these proposed projects. And it really is just, it is alarming, it is stark. I think it violates our Article 12, Section 3 of the Louisiana Constitution that allows the public, in fact, requires the public, to have total and complete transparency with regard to public deliberations that affect them. And it really is a mutation on the constitutional requirement of taxation without representation, Danielle. We're talking about massive products, whether they're data centers, meta centers, whatever they are, big CCS projects coming into our state, whereby these big corporations are being afforded massive tax incentives, massive tax breaks. They're using public land, and often they are changing zoning laws that allow these infrastructure facilities to be built. These are things that directly impact the public,
Yeah.
us, our welfare, our fiscal stability, our kids and grandkids. And yet we are being entirely shielded from the process until the project, until the negotiations are complete, and the dirt is about to begin to be laid. But I've never seen anything like this in the state of Louisiana, whereby government can act in secrecy to this extent on matters of such profound importance. It's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, Chris. And, you know, one's knee jerk reaction might be to blame Susan Bourgeois, blame LD, what is it called? LED.
LED.
Yeah, LED, because they are the ones executing these contracts. And I'm not saying the idea for this entire scheme, the structure behind the scenes was not, you know, initiated at LED or not initiated uh, in the mind of the governor or, some part of the executive, but it was the legislature that ultimately passed these bills.
Absolutely, absolutely. Unlike in Texas, where our guest yesterday indicated that there is no codification in law in Texas allowing these things. In Louisiana, there are, and it was our legislature in 2024. Like, you're exactly right, Danielle, that authorized precisely the vast restructuring of LED that places really unchecked authority in the Louisiana Economic Development head, Susan Bourgeois, with no checks or balances regarding these projects. And then, of course, which authorized these non disclosure agreements. 50 representatives, I think, Danielle, 50 state and local officials in Louisiana have already signed these non disclosure agreements. So
That
they
we
are
know of.
not, that we know of. So if you have a big data center or some big industrial development that's being proposed in your parish, you're not allowed to know anything about it. It's just absolutely extraordinary. Now, the law says, the law, HB 461 from 2024, which we'll get into, says that these non disclosure agreements, if the project is worth $5 million dollars or more, which is a very easy threshold to satisfy, of course, and the outside limit on the non disclosure is 2 years, but by 24 months. So for 24 months, the public can be kept in the dark. And by that point, 80-90% of the
The
project is
cake is
already,
baked.
yeah, exactly. The cake is baked at that point. It's really too late for the public to go back and be able to have, to make efficacious objections to it at that point. It's just too little, too late by then. And so I can't think of anything that's more repugnant to a Republican form of government than to shut the very citizens whose lives, tax dollars, land is most directly affected by this, to shut them out of the process entirely. Not only should we not be shut out of the process, we should be aware of every single detail of these projects. And yet
And
we are not.
and Chris, to me, this signals this is a symptom of bigger problems, right? The NDA is a problem, sure, in and of itself, but it's a symptom of much, much bigger problems than what they're actually covering over. To me, this is the fact that a government would want to hide these details from the public says a lot. And the fact that the Louisiana government wants to hide these details from from the public, says a whole lot more than that. And I'll just say, you know, to me, this is a problem with having a party mindset instead of a people mindset. So you talked about the fact that nothing like this ever happened under John Bell Edwards, and we could probably debate for several hours the fact that, maybe the idea never crossed his mind or the opportunity to bring this kind of legislation never came. Or, we could say any number of things, but the fact is, there is this idea, there's this value in the Republican Party that says that government is inefficient, that we need to operate more like a company. There's this kind of mindset, which in and of itself is fine, right? Those are true isms. Those are facts. However, the government has to operate differently than a company, right? The government
Yeah.
has to operate within the constraints of the Constitution. And to me, this reveals either a blind trust in the executive or a blind submission to the executive, which we have talked, I think, extensively about on this show, just the power of the governorship of this state, the power that's wielded out of that office that just basically pressures and beats the legislature into submission. Now, that in and of itself is a problem too, but I think there's another problem, which is the legislature and really the entirety of government is operating. But what these NDAs reveal to me, the fact that they even exist, is that there is a fundamental misunderstanding or lack of understanding of the way government works, the purpose of government, and the actual text and meaning of the Constitution. Because if you had any value for that, there's no way you could vote for this bill. Are
No,
these right?
exactly. No, no possible way, Danielle. You touched on something very important, that we do have unnecessary bureaucratic, regulatory, administrative activity in our government. There's no question, and our government does need to be streamlined, but not at the cost of transparency to the people. I believe the whole tenor of Senator Mizell's bill, SB 494 from 2024, was to structure the Louisiana Economic Development Department, which is a government agency accountable to the people, along the lines of a corporation, as you said a minute ago. And it's not a corporation, it's not a private entity. Everything that government does, they are accountable to the people. Every public activity, every public movement, every public decision a government agency makes must be checked against the will of the people. And it simply cannot be done when there is this cloak of secrecy. The
Right.
other important point I want to make, Danielle, is that not only are these elected officials not exercising the type of constitutional oversight over the executive branch that they're constitutionally charged to execute, they're actually acting in collusion with the executive branch to veil, to impose this cloak of secrecy over government processes. And so there's I think it's even more sinister than simple indifference or neglect on the part of these elected officials. They are acting, they are complicit in the very secrecy that they are charged to make sure never occurs in government. But the reason why this is so important, Danielle, the reason why this is so important is because they are negotiating deals that involve our taxes,
Right.
that involve our land, that involve the rezoning of public property that can place one of these big industrial plants near private property, depreciating the value, as our guest yesterday said, depreciating the value of someone's private property, which it definitely will do. These are public activities that are being shrouded in almost total secrecy until it's too late to do anything about them. This is not just theoretical. These things have very practical and very real implications for citizens across Louisiana. And it's so hugely important that people are aware that this is going on, and how many officials to date have signed these agreements.
Yeah. And Chris, there was, just for folks who are watching, there was an article that came out, I believe, in March by WWNO. It was an investigative report that dug into this. That's the biggest report we have to date on this. And I will drop it in the chat. I don't know if the chat's working because I'm not, my chats appear to be disappearing. I'm putting stuff in there, it's disappearing. So I'll go and check on Facebook, but I want to put this this link in the chat for folks. And Chris, why don't we get into? I don't know if you want to talk about the votes on Mizell's bill first, or at all, or do you want to just talk about the votes on House Bill 461 from 2024?
Well, we can talk. I would like to mention the Republicans on her bill
Okay.
in the Senate and the House. I believe her bill was unanimous in the Senate. I think it was
Yeah,
39-0 in the Senate.
look at that.
All of the senators voted for this vast restructuring of LED and placing unchecked, unaccountable authority in the Secretary Susan Bourgeois. That was
I don't
39-0.
I don't know how effective this is because it looks pretty small on my screen, but maybe it's useful for somebody who would want to make a screenshot.
Yes. And so that's on the Senate side. There was not one senator who expressed apparently any skepticism about this. And then over in the House,
And
there,
Chris, to be fair, just to say, a lot of these restructuring bills, especially but you would think at the beginning of 2024, that was right after Bell Edwards was closed out and Landry came in. You can understand that there might be an interest and a little bit of a trust at that stage of the game for a restructuring of our economic development department overall, right? We've seen a lot of structural changes to a lot of departments in the last two years or so, to going on 3 years.
yes.
So I
And the
just want to make
goal,
that point.
yeah, you're exactly right, Danielle. And the goal was to make LED more business friendly. So the aspiration and the goal, I think, was laudable. But it, but it, but we don't believe in czars in our
Cor-
government. We don't believe in
correct.
giving an executive head complete unchecked authority to do anything. But nonetheless, it was early in Governor Landry's first term, and I understand the spirit behind that legislation. Over in the House, there were three, it looks like, who voted against it, three Republicans who opposed it, Amade, McCormick, and Schermerhorn. And of course, a number were absent, but it passed.
Wait, I think you're okay. I see. All right, I was looking at the wrong thing. I was looking at the absences.
Yeah,
I
and
had
there
to pull it
were,
up on
of
my phone
course,
because I can't read it on the screen.
yeah, 12 or 13 absences, but there were
Yeah.
three very astute conservative Republicans who said, wait a minute, what happened to checks and balances in our state government? Do we believe investing this kind of plenary authority in one executive head? And they were very skeptical. Amade, McCormick, and Schermerhorn voted against it.
And
And
Chris, can I
so,
just can I just stop you right there? I think
yeah,
what's interesting to me about this vote is how would they have voted in an Edwards administration on the same exact bill? Would we have seen the Republicans say, "Hey, we could see how this would be weaponized against us potentially, or misused, or mishandled"? So we're going to vote against it. But however, whenever it's a Republican administration, they are just going to go ahead and vote for it. Now, I don't want to get into too much of that kind of speculation, but I just think it's a very important thing for us to consider when we're thinking about legislation. And you and I do this all the time. Okay, if somebody else is in charge who's not for us, how is this going to work?
well, exactly, exactly. I would suspect, Danielle, that there would have been probably far more Republicans who had voted against this legislation if Governor Edwards had been the governor at that time. Because there's a natural tendency to view things more sinister when an opposing party is in control, and they probably would have looked at it more closely.
Yeah.
But with a new Republican governor who has campaigned on principles of constitutional conservatism and transparency, puts this up, legislators are less inclined to view the worst case scenarios. I think that's a very,
Yeah.
very valid point that you make.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And then, but the bill, the bill that authorizes these non. Oh, by the way, another thing that 494 does, Danielle, it runs all economic development projects, all of them directly through Louisiana economic development. And so again, well, I mean, I guess I implied that when I said that all of the authority for these things would be vested totally and exclusively in control of the Secretary of Louisiana Economic Development. But that's basically what 494 did. She has unchecked total authority with regard to these things.
And Chris, as you say that, I'm reminded of the bill that passed this session, Jacob Landry's bill, and how that must tie in to what they set up with House Bill 494, right? Because that basically cuts out the locality's ability to be involved in this or to have a say in these projects whatsoever, to involve themselves in any kind of permitting or any kind of basically making sure that they can't be an obstacle to the steamrolling of their own community.
That's exactly right. In his case, in the case of his bill, Danielle, on natural resources, you're exactly right. His bill totally divests local autonomy with regard to carbon capture and sequestration projects because he characterizes them all as having to do with natural resources. And all of that under his bill was fully and finally vested in the state. So local governments and local communities have, at this point, no authority to impede, restrict, or do anything to obstruct these projects with regard to carbon capture and sequestration. So yes, that's a valid point also, and all really is lines up very squarely with this broad push to centralize power in the hands
Yeah.
of the state and really divest local governments from any authority. That's really what's going on here. It's the same struggle that state governments have had historically with the federal government.
Yeah.
Danielle, it's just a parallel structure. It's always like the big guy on the block is always trying to extract more and more power and more control away from the smaller kids, and so that's what's going on here. But I do think it's important to point out HB 461,
Yeah.
which also came down in 2024, which was Stephen Jackson's bill, the rep from I believe it's from Caddo Parish up in Shreveport, and this was the bill that authorizes these non-disclosure agreements with regard to any economic development project in Louisiana, and basically, says that if local official, if you want to be involved in any of these negotiations, you have to sign these non-disclosure agreements, and you're muzzled. Really, according to the terms, from what I understand of NDAs, at least a couple that you and I talked about earlier, perpetually muzzled from talking with your people in your community about these economic negotiations and these projects. You just can't do it. Now the bill itself says it's the records become available. The records, the agreements, the details, the paper stuff becomes available after 2 years. But under the terms of these NDAs, or many of them, as far as the public official himself being able to talk about them, that is a perpetual duration. There is no time limit on it. Is that scary or what? So you have the 2 years there, and again, I mean, not to beat a dead horse here, Danielle, but basically what they're saying is we've elected essentially secret agents. These are secret agents that are contractually obligated to operate under a veil of total secrecy with regard to agreements that directly affect the people who elected them, and they're required to keep that muzzle on permanently, and the records become available after 2 years. You can do a lot of commercial development, Danielle. You can make a lot of progress, the government and these private corporations, in 2 years. And very
Yeah.
often it's just too late for the people to be able to make a meaningful protest at that point.
Yeah. Uh, which it doesn't mean they shouldn't protest, and they should protest meaningfully and with great passion. I think,
Absolutely,
but
absolutely,
the
and
damage may already be done.
yes, the damage may already be done at that point. And now HB 461, Danielle, passed in the House uh, by a relatively comfortable margin, although there were a number of Republicans who voted no on it and a number of others who were absent. So we had 18 Republicans who recognized this is absolutely contrary to Republican government. It goes against transparency. It violates the Constitution, and there's no way we're voting for it. And the ones who voted against it, I don't. Do we need to? You want to say who? I think we should on this bill. I think we need to say the Republicans who opposed this.
Yeah, it looks like it was Beryl Amity, Josh Carlson, Ray Cruz. This is like an eye exam, folks. Kathy Edmonston, Peter Egan, Julie Emerson, Jay Galley, Dodie Horton,
Horton.
Danny McCormick, Chuck Owen, Neil Reiser, Rodney Shammerhorn, Lori Schlegel, Joe Stagney. I can't remember Mr. Tarver's first name right now.
Philip.
And Philip Tarver. I don't know Thompson's first name either. Is that what it says?
What was Thompson's first name? Can't think of his first name either.
All
Representative
right, Lauren
Thompson.
Ventrilla and Neil Wilder.
And Neil Wilder. So those 18 Republicans, and of course you had a number who were absent: Bagley, Coates, Abear, Ilg, uh,
Miller?
and then
No.
some Democrats were absent as well. But this was the bill, Danielle, that authorizes these non-disclosures and basically says if you want to be involved in these negotiations, if you want to know the details of these proposed development projects, whatever they are, you have to sign these non-disclosure agreements. And this is also the bill that keeps all the records of these agreements and the details of these agreements totally confidential for up to 2 years. Now, it's important to point out here, Danielle, that some of these NDAs may have been signed directly between government officials and corporations, but the overwhelming majority of these NDAs are executed between the Louisiana Economic Development and these public officials. Everything is routed through, pipeline through, and goes through the Department of Louisiana Economic Development under Susan Bourgeois. So it's her agency that's issuing these non disclosure agreements to these public officials and saying, look, we have such and so big company wants to come in to Louisiana, big data center, whatever it is, or there's just an opportunity that we have, an economic opportunity. If you want to be made privy to these negotiations and to these developments, then you have to sign this NDA, and then you can come in and participate and talk about it. But even then, they're muzzled from talking to their local citizens about it. It doesn't authorize them to discuss anything with the people. It just authorizes themselves to know what's going on. So my question would be, of course, it's important for public officials, elected officials, to know what's going on with our tax dollars, to know whether a multi-billion-dollar data center is being proposed a mile from my house, or a big carbon capture and sequestration pipeline might be running 500 feet or 500 yards from a school. Of course, they have a right to know these things, whether or not a current zoning restriction is going to be amended and for what purpose, so, to allow some of these projects to be built. But what ultimate difference does that make if they have a muzzle on and they're not allowed
Right.
to talk to the people who elected them and who are
Right.
directly affected by this?
And one aspect we didn't talk about this morning, Chris, before, when we were prepping for this show, is the fact that just because this is a tool in the tool belt of the LED doesn't mean that they have to use it, right? So this is weaponized government This is a weaponized government tool to shield the public from knowing what's going on. Can we talk a little bit about when this bill, Jackson's bill, was being debated, HB 461 in 2024? You and I were on that bill like white on rice, I'll say that. And we did not know how they intended to use this, but we knew it was for no good purpose. And I just think, you know, when your spidey senses are up like that, whenever you recognize that, hey, this is the exact same way we feel about all of those the public records exemptions that they have been shoving down our throats for the last couple of years too, Chris.
Absolutely. And we were on this bill very, very energetically, Danielle, very energetically opposing this legislation because we said there is no possible way it is constitutional or it is legal for public officials to be able to discuss public matters, especially of this magnitude, and not have to disclose these things to the people who elected them. There's no possible way. It is a gross violation of Republican Democratic government. And we fought this very, very hard, particularly in the Senate. And the bill failed the first time on final passage in the Senate, Danielle, 19 to 19. You know, a tie is a fail.
Yeah.
Okay, a tie is a fail. And after it failed, my senator Franklin Foyle had voted for it because I knew it was coming up for reconsideration. We know when it's that close, especially if it's something that Governor Landry wants, they're going to have a revote on it, and he's going to start to put his boot on the neck. To Senator Foyle's credit, once he and I discussed this bill in detail, he changed his vote on revote from yes to no. Uh, but unfortunately, there were a couple of senators who had voted no originally who voted yes on revote. And those were Senator Womack and Senator Mike Facey. They voted yes. And Senator Kathy, who I believe had voted no, if I'm not mistaken, on the first vote, Danielle, was absent for the revote. Now
Yeah.
that just would have made it 20 to 19. It wouldn't have made the difference, but he was absent on the second vote. The bottom line is the bill failed on the first vote, but because obviously the governor got to two senators and put a tremendous amount of pressure on them on revote, it made it through 20 to 18, barely. But there was a lot of skepticism in the state senate on this bill when it was finally passed. A lot of controversy about it, and for
Yeah.
very, very good reason. But I can't. We're not going to be able to talk about this particular piece of legislation enough, or about the senators who allowed it to be ratified, both those who voted for and those who voted against, to their credit, because this is what ushered it in, and the reason why our government is operating under these NDAs right now, under this veil of secrecy, with regard to these huge commercial development projects that directly affect us, is because of HB 461 in 2024. No question about it.
And I'll tell you, Chris, I have thought about what was the motivation for this in Louisiana. And what I can only come up with is there is a need for NDAs in Louisiana by the political establishment because the government has expressed and has completely shown itself absolutely unwilling to hold industry accountable unless and until the trial lawyers are involved and there's vast, vast sums of money to be made, in which case they suddenly care about the environment, right? That's been our experience, right? There are uncapped wells that are making people sick in the Gulf. There are fish dying, they don't care. There has been unchecked damage to canals that make the life of the lifeblood of southern Louisiana, the fishermen, completely difficult, if not impossible. They have misused and abused oil spill recovery funds. I mean, the BP oil spill, if we had an actual accounting, a forensic accounting, an audit of how the funds for that spill were used, it will turn everybody's stomach. Mark my words.
Absolutely. No,
And
no, no question about it.
there has been total and utter disregard for the environment when it comes to Sportsman's Paradise. And this just shows that there's total and utter disregard for the actual people of Sportsman's Paradise. So
Yes.
that is why these NDAs are being used, Chris. If they thought, I think what Kathy said yesterday on our show was absolutely spot on target. She said that if these projects are so great, why do you have to hide them from the people? I understand that there may be certain details of a project that need to be withheld, but I can tell you one thing. I don't see any states lobbying. Well, I don't see any local communities lobbying to be the home to data centers. I don't see any communities lobbying to be the home of CCS. I don't see the people doing that. I mean, the politicians maybe, but not the people.
Right.
Not the people.
I
So
saw
I
yesterday, Danielle, 71%. This was on a national program yesterday, not conservative, not liberal. And it said that 71% of the American people are opposed to these data centers in their communities. But that's not even the ultimate important issue. It's a very important issue. What we're objecting to through these non-disclosure agreements is the process by
yeah.
which it is being done. It is not, they are not being vetted by the people. They're using our infrastructure, our land, they're rezoning property, and essentially they're doing things that directly affect us using our tax dollars, and yet we're being completely shut out of the process.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It's the process whereby they do this. And you know what, Danielle? I invite our viewers to make this inference. If our government is willing to go to these lengths to hide the people's business from the people on matters of such consequence, what else is our government hiding from us? And
Yeah.
can we really trust our government at all? They are telling us by this very process of secrecy and darkness that we can't trust them, and that
Yeah.
we are very unlikely, once you really break these things down and look at them very closely, to approve of these things, and that there's no way that the people will come to the conclusion that the benefits outweigh the enormous costs and the enormous risks. They've already made that calculus, or they wouldn't be insisting upon this level of secrecy in the process. That's what I want people to walk away with and begin to become much, much more skeptical of your government generally than you are right now. That's what you should think about when you become aware of these non disclosure agreements. Danielle, Thomas Paine and our founding fathers said, they warned us about this type of thing, and
Yeah.
it was their view that government on its best day is a necessary evil, on its worst day is an intolerable evil. We need far more citizens to be approaching our government with that sort of vigorous skepticism than is in existence right now.
Yeah. Well, Chris, last night a friend sent me a link to a video of public testimony in Cameron Parish at the police jury meeting there. And there is an LNG export terminal that's being developed in Cameron Parish. This does not have anything to do with an NDA, but I think the point is exemplifies why these NDAs are viewed by the government as absolutely necessary. Is so the locals are extremely upset. I spoke with a representative after that. The friend sent me the phone number of a guy from an organization called For a Better Bayou. And he told me that because of the way that Venture Global they did some kind of dredging for their work for the export terminal, the government, the Louisiana state government, told them under no circumstances can you cause any problems with the canals. And if you do, there'll be problems. Well, guess what? They did. There was a huge mud spill. The oyster fishermen only got 18 days out of close to 200 days of a season, like 160 plus days of a season, because of that mud spill. Do you know our government has not done anything to hold them accountable, federal or local? So the local, federal, or I think the locals are trying, obviously, but the state government has not stood up. Governor Landry has not stood up. DEQ has not stood up. The Conservation and Energy Department has not stood up to hold these people accountable. And this is for a project that, by all means, people generally probably wouldn't have a problem with because it's actual industry, creating actual jobs, doing real things. But the way that this government just wants to give away the farm to these large firms completely. I mean, I think there was a right of way, a parish road that was going to be given to this project indefinitely with zero notice to the people. I mean, maybe 2 days notice to the people. Can you imagine if a thoroughfare in your community is shut down just for construction for the convenience of this company that's destroyed your livelihood already? Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
So I just say that to say, okay, this is the backdrop. This is the way our government, the state of Louisiana's government, has handled projects that are on the up and up, right? They've done nothing for the people. They've done nothing. And so imagine what treasures untold await us with these NDAs.
exactly. Very, very well said. And this is, again, this is our infrastructure. We're
Correct.
paying for this.
Yes, they don't.
We're pay-
We don't owe the government anything.
exactly. And speaking of redress, Danielle, is there going to be any accountability? Will the government or the corporate or with these corporations have to compensate property owners for the extent to which their private property is depreciated or devalued because of these massive industrial facilities being located near their property? Are they going to be compensated at all for that? Absolutely no provision for any of this. Ultimately, Danielle, costs versus benefits. They're always talking about economic development, jobs, jobs, jobs. I don't know that that thesis bears close scrutiny. When you look at some of the facilities they're talking about, for instance, the data centers, that is the
Yeah.
big, big thing now, these huge data centers. Our guest yesterday, Ms. Kathy, said that to run a multi-billion-dollar data center, it requires, what did she say, 20 or 30 permanent employees to run the
Yeah.
facility? They're largely self-genning. They're largely self-operating once they are constructed. So yes, maybe you're offering some short-term jobs here, some short-term construction jobs, which benefit local communities and local families, if they're even the ones who are being employed, if they're
Correct.
even the people who are being employed, the
And
local
I
employees.
And I also really appreciated what she said. I hadn't taken into consideration the market distortion that happens when these massive projects come into these tiny, tiny communities or these low population communities where property values are bubbling, soaring, and then all of a sudden they're crashing through the floor. I mean, it's just unthinkable. It's actually just causing the implosion of communities that have already been hit by. I mean, you think about, in the 90s, what hit these communities was all of the big box stores and franchises ran the restaurants and the local shopkeepers out, and the big box pharmacies as well. So now there's these places have already been decimated. All of the jobs have already been shipped overseas. Trump is working, and I think Scott Bessent and others are trying to doing a lot of things to bring those jobs back. But in the meantime, we're having these further market distortions that are going to completely cause chaos and harm to these small communities. It's unthinkable.
Yes. And yet another reason, Danielle, why transparency and light is so important in these processes.
Yes, because then the community could make the trade-off, right? Then they could be
Or
responsible
determine,
for.
yes, or determine whether the trade-off is worth it.
Exactly.
That's ultimately what this is all about.
Yeah.
So it really is one of those things that absolutely demands close scrutiny, and it's hugely important. We're coming up re-election, Danielle. Is it
Yeah.
next year?
Yeah.
It is re-election, and I think it's massively important. And we will continue. We're going to talk in more detail, probably more than one time, about specifically who voted how on these two bills in 2024 that ushered this into our state. And I think that state representatives, state senators who voted for this should be held accountable for it at reelection. It is extremely important. I can't think of a bigger issue, and I think the ones who stood against it, the few in the House, and then roughly half of the Senate who stood against it, should be given credit for it for as well, for standing up. Because keep in mind, Danielle, they're not just voting against a bill here; they're voting against one of the major, if not the biggest, initiative of our governor of his term. I mean, so to oppose him and to vote against it, I think they deserve credit for having done so. And so I just think that politically this is going to be a significant liability for those who voted for these two bills.
Yeah, and Chris, now we're in this I don't know, Chinese finger torture,
Yeah.
Chinese finger trap situations, where what about the legislators who even voted against this bill, right? But then there's a project being developed in their community, and what's happening is, this is at least what I understand, and you can tell me if this is your understanding as well. LED says, come, if you want a seat at the table for what's happening in your community that you've been elected to represent, you have to sign this agreement. So if you're an elected representative, what do you do? Do you sign the agreement and then not be able to tell your people, or just choose to break the agreement so you can effectively represent your people in the interest of your community? Do you not sign the agreement, not have a seat at the table, and say, we'll just let the state railroad us over here? What is the answer?
If I were in their position, Danielle, I would say this. I would say, if I'm statutorily prohibited from talking with the people who elected me about projects and development that directly affects them and profoundly affects them, then I'm not gonna. Then what's the point of me signing an NDA? I think I would have more complicity. I think I would have more guilt on me if I signed an NDA and became aware of potentially adverse things that were coming to my community that could harm the people who elected me, and yet was not able to discuss it. I would rather either not sign the NDA or sign the NDA and then say, to hell with this. This is unconstitutional, and I'm going to go and I'm going to share what I have to share with my people. But it puts these local officials in a very, very difficult position, and of course, state elected officials as well, Danielle. But my presumption is that the 50 or so who have signed these NDAs have done so with the intention of honoring them, have done so with the intention of not disclosing this to their local communities. That would be my belief on that.
And Chris,
Yeah.
another option is you can not only refuse, but then you can take to the media, you can take to social media and say, look at this. LED is trying to get me to sign a non-disclosure agreement about a big project they're trying to attract to our community. What's up with that? Maybe everybody
Exactly.
needs to start paying attention to the kinds of trucks that are moving through our community so we know what the hell they're trying to do.
Yes. How many elected officials have done just that, Danielle? And say, look, I want to raise public awareness of what I believe is a completely illegal, unconstitutional development in our state. Here's what it is. I'm refusing to sign this non-disclosure agreement because it violates my fiduciary duty to the people who elected me, and I'm going to continue to raise public awareness about this, and I'm going to do everything within my power to repeal this law and to make sure that the public is made aware of exactly what is going on here. That is what a faithful public servant does. So even the ones who are not signing the NDAs, Danielle, are not doing that, are not standing up and raising public awareness about the gross assault on the Constitution and the gross assault on democratic government that this represents. That is the conspicuous silence that I find so alarming.
And the other thing I'll mention, Chris, is something that I don't know if we talked with Kathy Latham about this, or actually, I don't know if we did, but you think about how these people are somewhat politically savvy that are doing this, right? So anyone that would be that kind of a roadblock, that would be sounding an alarm, that would be loyal to the people in this, they're probably not getting approached to sign an NDA, right? They're probably going to, de facto be left out of the conversation, be, not invited to the table because the government knows whoever the powers that be over at LED or wherever know that these folks have a reputation for fidelity to the people, for honoring the people. So we're just not going to invite them to the table on this one.
Yeah.
You think that's happening?
Probably so, which leaves them in a position of not having any information whatsoever about what may be coming to their parishes. But all of them at this point, Danielle, even the quote unquote good ones, are aware of what is going on. They're aware that this is happening now. So I would call upon all of our conservative elected officials in Louisiana, particularly those that we have a lot of respect for, to come out and begin to speak publicly about these non disclosure agreements and even to pledge to bring legislation in the upcoming session to repeal HB 461. This is
Yeah.
what we need. We need this law to be repealed in the legislature. And I'll tell you, it's not selling well, Danielle. This is not selling well with citizens across the state. And again, to me, it's about the process. You can feel however you feel about data centers, carbon capture and sequestration, or whatever industrial development you want. But it's the process. The people have a right to know what is going
Absolutely.
on. And these NDAs completely shield them from that. That's what's so nefarious about it.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you on that, Chris. And I
And
would
by the way, as
welcome.
you mentioned earlier, Danielle, you and I are 100% for corporate development. We want the economy to boom. We want people to have jobs. That's what constitutional government is all about. But it can't be done like this. It cannot be done like this. The government does not have the right to impose its will on citizens to whom it is accountable. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I would also argue, Chris, that it's time for a brand new approach in Louisiana when it comes to economic development because the old way wasn't working. It hasn't served the people. We're seeing the way that plays out, with these uncapped wells, for instance, and all of the damage that's been left unchecked, and the companies that have been held completely unaccountable for the way
Yeah.
that they have handled our land, right? We are the people of Louisiana. It's our land, it's our water. The government didn't give it to us. The government didn't create the fish. God did. So it's time for a new day in Louisiana where economic development is actually for the people. It actually benefits the people. It doesn't actually rape and pillage the land and bring toxins into the water. I don't think that's outrageous for the people of a state to be asking that, hey, if we want some company to come in here and do something, it needs to, number one, add value. Number two, be you have to be productive members of our society. You don't come in and drop something down and then leave. You don't import all kinds of labor. And the way that you treat our land is the way that you treat us. The way that you treat our water is the way that you treat us. If you stay here and live among us, you're a heck of a lot more likely to treat our place well. So that's what economic development in the state of Louisiana in a new day needs to look like, right?
Absolutely, absolutely well said, Danielle. Absolutely well said. I can't really add anything to that. I just, uh, I just am continue. I continue to be very, very alarmed by the extent to which our elected officials are going along with this
Yeah.
and allowing this to happen. I don't know, Danielle. I think we mentioned earlier, we thought it was 50 local and state elected officials who have signed these NDAs. Who knows? It could be up to 60 now. They could be signing them more every day. We just don't know for sure what's going on. But you know, they are entire by law. They cannot talk about the details of these projects if they've signed these NDAs. But whether or not they have signed an NDA is subject to public disclosure. And so we can continue to keep our viewers and our listeners updated about who has actually signed these agreements.
Yeah, and we absolutely will, won't we, Chris?
Oh yeah, no question about it. And at the point you made earlier, Danielle, about and also those who perhaps voted against the legislation, enabling legislation on this, but have since signed NDAs. I think that that's an important point to point out as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I look, it's not to say we don't understand that they're in a tough spot, particularly those who voted against it and then have been approached. But again, I mean, certainly the ones who voted for it, you put yourself in that position to start with. So there's, it is what it
Absolutely.
is.
It,
Chris,
it is what it is. But this is something that we're going to continue to harp on because I think once the people are educated, Danielle, that this is your government that is accountable to you, that is
yeah,
acting behind your back and acting in secrecy. Uh, once I think it is going to invite them and create a more robust, healthy suspicion of government across the board, which I think is hugely important. That the way in which our citizens look at our government needs to change on a fundamental level. We need to stop looking at our government as our big brother benevolent babysitter and look at our government as the potentially malignant influence that it can be when it's vested with the kind of power that we have ceded to it. You don't just cede power, you don't cede your natural rights and your natural power to a government and then assume that they're going to act in your best interest. We have to assume just the opposite. Power corrupts, not only in individuals, but in governments as well. And we have to change the way that we view our government. And we have to begin to look at our government much more skeptically than we do now. If we had a population, Danielle, of citizens that viewed the government the way our founding fathers envisioned we would, I'm not sure that we would have had the sort of horrendous spectacle during COVID, for instance, that we had, where we had vast majority of citizens that just reflexively bowed in obedience to whatever the health agency said, whatever the government said, whatever the governor said, even though those protocols hurt and damaged citizens and businesses and ultimately our health. If you look at the vaccines themselves, I'm not sure that we would have ever I don't think a generation ago it would have ever gotten to that point, is what
yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah, and I will agree with you, Chris, and I'll also say that we need to fundamentally change the way our government looks, right? So you think about LED, and the purpose of LED is to attract economic development projects to the state of Louisiana. Well, guess what? You know what else attracts projects to the state of Louisiana? Low insurance rates, good schools, a low tax base, good roads. I mean,
Absolutely. So Danielle, that's such a great point that you bring up. So maybe if our insurance rates were manageable, maybe if our schools were above par, and you could send your kid to an average public school in Louisiana and know that they would receive a good education. Maybe if we didn't have to worry about being assaulted when you walk down the street in certain locales in Louisiana, with our crime rate among the top per capita in the nation, maybe if we addressed those issues, they wouldn't have to conceal, they wouldn't have to give these massive corporations these multi-billion dollar tax breaks to create incentive for them to come to our state. Maybe they would be willing to come here because it's a healthy place to do business, and they would be willing to pay appropriate taxes to build local infrastructure instead of starving our local schools and our local communities through these massive tax subsidies and tax breaks that they're getting. So maybe they would come here for all the right reasons if
Imagine.
these issues that you raised were properly addressed in our state, instead of having to basically be bribed to come here.
Right, exactly. And I'll also say, Chris, I'm looking for the post. It might have been on Facebook. I'm looking on X to see. I don't see it. But there was an article that came out this past, it's been the last week or two, that said that California was in the top three worst places to live. And so I clicked on the article. Well, guess where the number two worst place to live was?
Let me
Louisiana.
guess. Right here in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And so, Daniel, I think you've really hit on something here. I think that our government institutions and our governor and LED recognize that corporations are not going to simply look around for places to go open a business and say, well, let's go to Louisiana. Let's abide by the rules. Be prepared to pay our taxes. Let's be prepared to be good members of the community there, open and transparent. They're not going to choose Louisiana. So what does the government have to do? It has to grant all of these corporate concessions to them to get them to come here, and then call it economic development. It's not economic development when multi-billion dollar corporations are coming and building these big facilities in your community, and they're not paying any taxes to the
No,
local communities, when
that's
they're
called corporate
starving the local
welfare.
communities. Oh, but Danielle, let me say this. They did offer, I heard that one of the corporations offered to pay for the band uniforms in one of the rural parishes, to pay for their band uniforms, or maybe to pay for the kids' lunches for a year. It's a real insult. But even corporations who would not otherwise choose Louisiana will probably choose Louisiana if they're getting these kind of massive tax subsidies, and,
Well,
and,
what?
and they're not having to disclose to, and government officials are not having to disclose to their to the people who elected them what's going on, what's being done. Our government is creating every arbitrary incentive for these corporations to come to Louisiana and do things that may or may not be, and very likely are not in the best interests of our citizens. But that's such a great point that you made a few minutes ago.
Well, thank you. And it's not hard for these companies to make the decision, especially when it seems the terms of the contracts means that they can just dump these massive data centers here, for instance, and have no responsibility whatsoever whenever they have left their utility. At some point, the servers in these things are only good for about every 2 years. I think that's that's a conversation for another day. That I believe in their accounting to Wall Street. They are oh, what is that? What's the accounting term, Chris? They're depreciating their servers at a rate, I believe, of 7 years, but they're only actually useful or in date for two. And so
Yeah.
imagine when they build these massive data centers, and what happens 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 7 years down the road? Are they going to be continually replacing those servers, or are they just going to abandon the whole thing? I mean, time will tell. I guess in some ways we'll have to find out. I'm sure some of these are going to get built, but they don't all have to.
Exactly. And someone made an important point recently, Danielle. Do we even know the amount of data centers that are required to make sure that all citizens in Louisiana have access to AI if they choose to have access? I mean, what's the limit of all of this? Are they going to end up putting a data center in every parish in Louisiana? What is the limit? We can't even ask our government, okay, would one data center serve the infrastructure needs of Louisiana citizens and AI? Or do you need 10 or do you need 11? We don't have any answers to any of this.
Well, Chris, and they cannot have their cake and eat it too, right? I mean, we have no idea what the data centers are actually even being used for. What kind of data is going in there,
And
right?
what's the ultimate, and is there an ultimate, even more malevolent purpose to all of this,
Right,
Danielle?
right. We don't have the answer to that. So we're not allowed to know that they're coming. We're not allowed to know what they're doing. We're not allowed to take tax dollars from them, but we are allowed to pay for their fire station, and we are allowed to lose property value and completely give over our community to a monstrosity that may have toxic effects.
Exactly. That is what it all comes down to, and it's all, Danielle, called economic development that is being celebrated among government officials across the state. Economic development. If
You
this is
know,
economic development, then I've got some oceanfront property in, the desert that I'd like to sell you today, Danielle. It is a grotesque distortion of any realistic understanding of economic development. People, corporate lobbyists, big corporations, and government officials are the only people who will benefit from this, ultimately, in my opinion. And
yeah.
whether or not what I just said is true, it should be the people themselves who are making these decisions. And that brings us full circle back to these non disclosure agreements. The people are in control. We are supreme, we are sovereign, and we should be the ones making the final decisions on whether or not these things are coming into our communities. And right now, we are being entirely shut out of the process.
Yeah, I think 2027 is going to be a pretty gnarly year when it comes to elections in this state. I mean, number one, and maybe this will lead into our announcements, Chris, we know that President Trump is making some major announcement tomorrow evening in a national address related to some findings related to the election. There's, I think, a little bit more than speculation that there was foreign interference in the election as part of the conversation tomorrow. We'll see what comes out today. But Joe Hoft will be joining us tomorrow, and I already primed him that we're going to be asking for his predictions on what he expects President Trump to say, what he hopes President Trump will say. You know, he wrote a whole book series, 3 volumes on the Steal. I think it's called The Steal, his book series. But anyway, he will be joining us tomorrow. He's got a lot to say. I'm sure this is the first time he's joining us since he had a big health scare. He had a stroke about 2 months ago, maybe, or maybe a little bit longer than that. But he's doing great. And look, God's faithful. He's still fighting. And he's been publishing some work for us. I know he's published some of your pieces, Chris. He published one of mine today. I put it in the chat. Shameless plug. Absolutely shameless plug. This is
It's okay. You're entitled to one.
I got no shame when it comes to this, but this piece that I submitted to him was for it's about the war on our energy sovereignty as a state. And I think there's no greater measure of the war on energy sovereignty than carbon capture and sequestration. So, you know, there's real productive value, and then there is burying money under the ground for
Yes.
no good
And
reason. So,
also being done, sadly enough, under the pretext and under the cloak of non-disclosure agreements, of course.
yeah.
So, what does it tell you, Danielle, about the extent to which these people believe citizens would approve of all of this, that they have to cloak it in secrecy? Perhaps they did some kind of a poll. Perhaps they knew that 70 or 71% of the citizens in Louisiana would say not no, but hell no on this.
Yeah.
So instead of engaging in transparency, honoring the will of the people, they go this route and try to veil it all under a shroud of secrecy. Very, very sad, Danielle. But you know what? The great thing is we have the record votes on the bills, and we'll continue to talk about who voted for and who voted against, because I think voters have a right to know these things and to register their desires at election time.
Yeah, 100%. And Chris, another plug, which is also shameless but necessary. Join the Warrior Circle. So today, if you were in the Warrior Circle, you had the right to text or call the Freedom Phone. Now, that's a new development. I think I just announced it yesterday for the first time, and people may have been a little shy today. But we want you to feel like you can call in. But, you got to join as a member of the Warrior Circle to be able to dial in. So you can do that at join.freedomstate.us, and we would love, love, love for you to become part of that inner circle. And we also want to make sure that you're supporting LeCag, because how in the world else are you going to know who voted how on what, and how are you going to know how to parse through these issues and whether and how deep your legislator or your state senator was involved if you don't support LeCag? I mean, you might know if you don't support LeCag, but we need LeCag to exist. So make sure that you support LeCag so we can keep bringing this truth to you. Chris does a lot of heavy lifting, and we're so grateful for you, Chris. Also really
You're welcome.
appreciate what you bring to this show. We have a lot of fun, probably more than we deserve.
More than we deserve. More than we deserve. LACAG.org, balancing the playing field in the legislature and bring full transparency to citizens across the state. So support the state of freedom, support LeCag. And Danielle, it's an hour and 21 minutes. Where does the time go, Danielle?
I know, absolutely. And just one last announcement, I guess, but the Storm Summit is coming up in September. These are our friends over at Unauthorized, headed up by Matt Meck, and this will be an excellent event to attend. And hopefully, whatever President Trump says tomorrow will help this be even spicier and more meaningful than it would be before whatever he said. So if y'all have an interest, you can go to stormsummit.us, and if y'all want to support us and our attendance at that, let us know. You can drop me a line at danielle@freedomstate.us or chris@lecag.org, and we'd be happy to talk to you about what that might look like and how we might cover that event best in your mind. So
absolutely. Also advertise
Yeah.
with the state of freedom. If you've got a business, a small business or whatever, and you want to advertise your business, nobody can promote it like we do. And we are excited about the prospects, excited about our benefactors and businesses that are currently working with us, Danielle,
Yeah.
and look forward to continuing to build that as well. We enthusiastically promote businesses, nonprofits that we believe in across the state. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Chris. Well, I will see you back here tomorrow, and we'll have Joe with us, like I said.
Well, I'm excited about it. God bless you, Danielle.
God bless you. Have a great one.
You too. Pokey Claw, right here in Mid-City in Baton Rouge. It's Baton Rouge's newest claw machine arcade. Jenin absolutely loves it. Packed with Pokemon gear and fun for all ages. You got to go to Pokey Claw. I love it. Jenin wants to go there every Saturday. It's just a wonderful place to go for the family, for the kids. Pokey. Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lacag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative podcast in Louisiana.